I've always believed in the idea that life has a way of testing you. For some, those tests are small, insignificant even, but for others, like me, they come in waves that crash hard enough to take you under. My name is Grayson Lockwood. Maybe you've heard of Nexus Solutions, the cybersecurity firm I built from the ground up. It's a real labor of blood, sweat, and tears. Growing up, things weren't easy. My mother worked 2 jobs to make sure I could go to school, but we never had much. I used to dream about making something of myself, about creating something big, something that would change everything. I always thought Melissa and I had a good thing. She was the kind of woman who would walk into a room and immediately turn heads. She had a presence, and she used to tell me, every night before bed, how much she loved me, how proud she was of what we were building together. But then, somewhere along the way, those words stopped meaning much. She started to feel more like a stranger than a partner. She gave up her art career to support me, but over time, it felt like she resented that decision more than anything. I think she blamed me for her lack of fulfillment. She needed attention, but I was too busy, too wrapped up in the launch of our cybersecurity platform. I couldn't blame her for wanting more, but what could I do? The platform was my dream, the one thing I'd worked so hard for, and it was right on the edge of becoming a game changer. Millions, no, billions, were riding on its success. But as the stakes grew, so did the distance between us. That's when Aiden Carr started showing up more often. Aiden was an old acquaintance of Melissa's, and to be honest, I didn't think much of him at first. He had a lot of failed business ventures under his belt, and now he was my business partner, or at least a part of it. I'll admit, there was something off about him. He always seemed to have this strange look in his eye when he talked to Melissa, like he was sizing her up. I never said anything to her about it. I was too busy with work, too busy with Nexus Solutions to worry about her old acquaintance. I should have paid more attention. Melissa's art dreams had become nothing more than passing mentions over dinner. Whenever she tried to talk about opening her own gallery, I could barely be bothered to listen. The company was everything. I was building the future, and she was, well, I didn't know what she was anymore. There were nights when I came home late, finding her sitting in the dim light of our living room, staring at a painting or reading through some old journal. One evening, she told me, "You've become a ghost, Grayson." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. A few weeks later, she went to an art exhibition with some friends. That's where she ran into Aiden again. It was all so casual at first, but I noticed the change in her after that. She came back from the event with a new energy, a new spark. I didn't understand it. I should have been happy for her, but it felt off. It wasn't the same energy she had when she first started painting. This was something different. The next business event I went to, Aiden did something that didn't sit right with me. In front of a room full of potential investors, he went out of his way to praise me, praise Nexus Solutions. But the way he did it, there was a slight edge. His words were laced with doubt, carefully crafted to make me seem like a risk. But he did it so subtly that no one else seemed to notice. He used Melissa as a way to segue into his little game. I remember the exact words he said to me. "You know, Grayson, not everyone has the leadership capacity to handle a company this size. But I believe in you. I'll be here to help. Whatever you need." It wasn't the words themselves that bothered me. It was the way he said them, like he was planting a seed of doubt. That's when I started noticing the little things. The way Melissa's eyes would linger on Aiden during meetings. The casual touches. How she'd laugh a little too much at his jokes. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. After all, who could blame her? I was always working late, and she was, well, she was stuck in her own head. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Later that night, I tried talking to Melissa about it. I told her I was feeling like she was slipping away, that maybe we needed to talk more, spend more time together. She looked at me with those tired eyes and sighed. "You don't understand, Grayson," she said. "I'm stuck here. You don't see me anymore. I gave up my life for you. For this company." I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "You never listen, Grayson. All you care about is this stupid platform of yours." Her words stung, more than they should have. But what could I say? She was right, in a way. I had become consumed by it all. The platform, the company, the future. She had become an afterthought, someone I used to share my dreams with, now just another part of the routine. A few days later, she handed me the first documents. She said they were nothing, just some basic contracts, but the look in her eyes said otherwise. Aiden had convinced her to give him some details about our clients. Maybe it was for the gallery, maybe it was for something else, but she handed them over. That was when I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't realize how close it was, how much it was going to hurt. And all the while, Aiden was working behind the scenes. His secretary, Rachel Vaughn, was moving through the company like a ghost, quietly gathering information, bribing the weak links. I didn't know it at the time, but Oliver Craig, the CFO, was already in Aiden's pocket. Oliver had always been a bit reckless with money, drowning in gambling debts. Aiden knew how to play him. I never suspected a thing. Not yet. But the pieces were falling into place. Slowly, carefully, methodically. And me? I was too busy to notice. There's something about the way people can weave their words to make you believe things you wouldn't otherwise. Aiden was getting really good at it. When he started telling Melissa that Nexus Solutions was on the verge of bankruptcy, I almost laughed. But I had no idea how deep into the web he had already pulled her. He convinced her, convinced both of us, really, that the only way to save the company was to restructure everything. That's when he started showing her falsified financial reports, ones that made my cybersecurity project look like a colossal failure. He told her it wasn't her fault, but that something had to change. The idea of losing everything, my dream, sent her into a tailspin, and she started trusting him more than me. Aiden wasn't done yet. He brought in a lawyer, Lawrence White, someone I'd never met before, but who seemed to appear out of nowhere at just the right moment. White forged documents in my name. Contracts, agreements, legal letters, all carefully crafted to make it look like I had agreed to a new financial deal with Aiden and that I was on board with his plan. Melissa looked at these documents and didn't question a thing. She believed every word. That was when I realized I'd lost her. Not to another man. No, that would have been too easy. But to a manipulation so insidious I couldn't even begin to understand it. At work, things were getting tense. I could feel it. Jules, my assistant, was always sharp, always on point. She was the one person who had been with me from the beginning, and I trusted her more than anyone else. One morning, she came to me with an odd expression on her face. "Grayson, there's something off with the files in the system," she said. "Some of the documents have been altered. Not just a little either. They're wrong." I didn't want to believe it. I told her to double-check, to make sure it was a glitch or some kind of mistake. But when she came back to me with Jacob Miller, our lead programmer, I knew it wasn't. Jacob had been able to pull up the access logs, and what he found made my blood run cold. Rachel Vaughn, Aiden's secretary, had been in the system more times than anyone else. Not just a casual once or twice either. She had been accessing files that only a handful of people in the company would even be able to view. I tried to play it off at first. After all, I had bigger things to focus on. But Jules was persistent, and Jacob was insistent that something wasn't right. They both wanted me to confront Aiden about it, but I couldn't yet. I had to be sure. In the meantime, things were getting worse. Melissa's loyalty was slipping away, piece by piece. Rachel started to notice the cracks, and she wasn't blind to what Aiden was doing. He was using her, manipulating her into gathering sensitive information, all while pretending that he was looking out for her interests. One day, Rachel came to me with a strange look on her face. She said she needed to talk, that it was important. "I can't keep doing this," she said quietly, pulling me aside when Aiden wasn't around. "I know what's happening, Grayson. He's lying to you. He's lying to all of us." I didn't know what to say. I was too focused on Melissa, on trying to fix the damage that had already been done between us. "Rachel, you're just his secretary. What do you mean?" I asked, trying to play it off like it was no big deal. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I've seen it. He's been covering his tracks, altering numbers, making sure no one figures out what he's really doing. I've seen him talk about you, about Nexus Solutions. He's trying to take everything from you." I felt a knot in my stomach, but I wasn't ready to hear it. "Not yet. I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. "You're not making sense." Rachel's face hardened. "Just be careful, Grayson. I've been in this game long enough to know when someone's playing you." I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right, but I was too busy trying to hold on to Melissa to focus on anything else. Every conversation with her felt like I was speaking to a stranger. She was cold, distant. And Aiden? He was always there, always waiting in the wings. Then came the night when things really started to unravel. We had a corporate meeting scheduled to announce the launch of the platform's testing phase. I'd been working tirelessly to get the platform to a place where we could demonstrate its potential to clients. The stakes were high. This was the moment we'd been building towards for months. But Aiden had other plans. I think we should demo it to one of our major clients, Aiden suggested during the meeting, his voice smooth, calculated. Show them what we've been working on. Let them see the potential. It was too soon. The system wasn't ready. There were still bugs, issues that we hadn't worked out yet. I could feel the pressure mounting as Aiden pushed, but the worst part was how Melissa stood behind him. She wasn't even looking at me when she spoke. You should listen to Aiden, Grayson, she said, her voice distant. He's trying to help. Help? No. He was using her. I tried to protest, but Aiden quickly turned the conversation, convincing me that this was the only way forward. Melissa, once again, was on his side. I knew then that I was fighting a losing battle. He asked for access to the test servers, and against my better judgment, I gave it to him. And that's when everything started to fall apart. While all this was happening, my assistant Jules was noticing something odd. Melissa's behavior had been changing, and not just in a small way. She was avoiding me more than ever, and it seemed like she was always on the phone with someone, whispering to Aiden when I wasn't looking. Jules started keeping an eye on her. I think we need to talk, she told me one evening. I've seen enough. Melissa is too far gone, Grayson. She's not the person you think she is anymore. And I think Aiden's manipulating her. I wanted to believe Jules. I did, but it hurt. It hurt so much that I couldn't even look at my own wife without feeling like she was slipping away. Jules was right, though. The pieces were falling into place, and I was powerless to stop it. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. There are moments when you look at someone, and you think you know them. You think you understand them, that you've peeled back enough layers to see what's beneath. But in reality, all those layers are still there, waiting, hiding something far darker than you could ever imagine. It wasn't until Jacob and Jules came to me with the emails that the weight of the conspiracy truly began to settle in. At first, I didn't believe it. The idea that Melissa, my wife, was working with Aiden to bring down everything I had built, it was just too much to grasp. But the evidence was undeniable. Jacob had gone through the logs, piecing together the connections between Aiden, Melissa, and the falsified reports. And then, in the deepest corners of the system, he found it. A series of emails between Aiden and Melissa. They were discussing everything. How to sabotage the platform, how to funnel money away from the company, and even how to push me out of the picture. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. I didn't know what to do with that information. I wanted to confront them immediately, but I knew that would only give them a chance to cover their tracks. So, I did what anyone in my position would do. I hired a private detective. Marcus Hale was his name. He was sharp, discreet, and relentless. I didn't want to know the details of his methods, but he got the job done. A few days later, he called me with news that made my stomach churn. "I've got the footage you wanted," he said over the phone, his voice low and steady. Melissa and Aiden met at a hotel. I got pictures of them walking into a room together. I've also got recordings of Aiden buying forged documents from Lawrence White. Looks like he's been getting more than just your company's secrets. I didn't know how to respond. The only thing I could do was say, thank you, even though it felt hollow, like I was thanking him for a betrayal that was too big to comprehend. I'd seen enough. It was time to make my move. A few nights later, I invited Aiden and Melissa over for dinner. I had to act casual, like nothing had changed, like I wasn't onto them, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Aiden arrived first, as expected. His grin was wide, that same smug look on his face that I used to dismiss as harmless arrogance. Melissa showed up a little later, almost as if she were walking on eggshells. It was clear that she knew something was off. Dinner was awkward. I watched the two of them, waiting for any sign that they knew I knew. I didn't ask about work at first. No, I wanted to dig deeper, Get them to slip up on something personal. Melissa, I said, breaking the silence. How's the art gallery coming along? I know you've been working hard on it. She shifted in her seat, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her wine glass. It's going well, she replied, her voice betraying her unease. But I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately, Grayson. You know how it is. Aiden quickly chimed in, trying to smooth things over. Yeah, the gallery's a great idea. I think it could really take off if you just get the right people behind it. He was trying too hard. It wasn't even subtle, but I let him talk, knowing that it would all come crashing down eventually. I moved to the topic of Nexus Solutions, casually mentioning how things were going with the platform and the investors. Aiden stiffened, and for a moment, I thought he was going to slip up. The way he hesitated before speaking, it was like he knew that the game was up. I think we're getting closer, Aiden said, his voice a little too smooth, but there's still some obstacles to overcome. I could see it in his eyes. He was fighting to keep his cool, but he was getting too comfortable. I asked one last question, pushing just a little harder. So, Aiden, what do you think about the future of the company? The platform's been a huge gamble. Is it really going to work out? He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Melissa reached across the table and put her hand on his. Her eyes flicked nervously to me before she spoke. You're asking too much, Grayson. You don't see how hard we've been working to make this happen. It was all too much. Aiden's mask was slipping. He was about to reveal it all, but Melissa, in that moment, stopped him. Her voice was tight, defensive. The walls between us had been erected, but they were made of paper, and with that one small action, they were crumbling. That night, things didn't go as planned. Aiden wasn't the only one who had secrets. Oliver Craig, our CFO, had a secret of his own, one that he couldn't keep hidden any longer. He came to me, nervous, his eyes darting around as if Aiden was lurking in the shadows, ready to strike. I need to talk to you, Oliver said, his voice shaking. I've been selling information. Aiden's plans. Everything he's been doing behind your back. I can't take it anymore. But you need to know. He's got something on me. Oliver went on to explain how Aiden had blackmailed him into working with him, using his gambling debts as leverage. But Oliver's fear wasn't just from Aiden. It was from the consequences of his own actions. I've lost 50 grand in the last few weeks, Grayson, he confessed. Aiden's threatening to expose me unless I keep doing what he says. I listened, but my focus was elsewhere. This was getting bigger than I could have imagined. I needed answers. And fast. Rachel, too, was unraveling. The pressure from Aiden, the guilt, it all came crashing down. One night, Jules came to me with the news I'd been waiting for. Rachel's broken, Jules said, her voice low. She came to me tonight. She admitted everything. She handed over copies of the forged documents Aiden and Lawrence White have been passing around. It's all here, proof that they've been using your name to steal everything. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. I had the proof I needed. I didn't waste any time. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with the entire team. The tension was palpable as everyone filed into the conference room. I stood in front of them, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I didn't even look at Aiden. He was already trying to find an escape route. I know everything, I said, my voice cold and unforgiving. I know about the conspiracy. I know what you've been doing behind my back. You've been playing me. All of you. I presented the evidence. Marcus's recordings, Rachel's documents. Aiden tried to defend himself, throwing accusations at Melissa, claiming that she was the mastermind behind everything. But I wasn't listening. Melissa tried to justify her actions, but her words fell flat. She tried to explain, to beg for my understanding, but it was too late. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. As I watched them squirm, I realized that everything I had built, my company, my life, was in ruins. And it wasn't just Aiden's fault. It wasn't just Melissa's fault. It was all of us. But it didn't matter now. The downfall had begun. The truth has a way of coming out when you least expect it. But when it does, it's always with a vengeance, tearing through everything you've built with a force that can't be ignored. After the revelations of Aiden and Melissa's betrayal, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let it all unfold. I had to act, and I had to act quickly. But this time, I wasn't going to fight alone. I wasn't going to let Aiden have the upper hand. Not anymore. I began assembling a network of allies, people who had nothing to gain from supporting me except doing the right thing. Jules, Marcus Hale, and even Jacob and Rachel, people who had seen the depths of the deception, became my eyes and ears within the company. Jules reached out to key employees, finding those who still had some loyalty to me, even if it was buried deep. She found whispers of employees who were also disillusioned with Aiden and his manipulations. They weren't just going to watch him tear the company apart. They wanted to help, but it wasn't enough to stop at the company. I needed more. I needed someone who could take Aiden's corruption into the public eye, someone who could expose him for what he truly was. That's when I reached out to Eleanor Price. She was a journalist, known for digging into corporate scandals, and her reputation for exposing corruption was just what I needed. I met her in a dimly lit coffee shop, far from the watchful eyes of anyone who might link us together. I slid a dossier across the table, the weight of it heavy with evidence. It contained everything: details about Aiden's shell corporation, his illegal dealings, and the forged documents. Eleanor's eyes glinted with intrigue as she skimmed through the papers. "I'll get this to the public," she said, her voice low but determined. "But we'll need more. We need a story that will stick." I told her I had that covered. We weren't just going to play defense, we were going on the offense. Meanwhile, my lawyer, Claudia Reyes, was working tirelessly to draft a lawsuit against Aiden and Lawrence White. Claudia was sharp, methodical, and unrelenting. She was the kind of person who would bring a fight, and I needed that in this moment. We were going after Aiden for everything: fraud, forgery, and corporate sabotage. We even had evidence of Aiden funneling company funds into a shell corporation, something that added an entire new dimension to the case. Claudia came to me one evening, her face a mask of determination. "Grayson, this is bigger than we anticipated," she said. "Aiden's been siphoning off money for months. We've got the paper trail, and I'm preparing for a full legal battle." But while all this was going on, Melissa's world was collapsing in on itself. As Aiden began to distance himself from her, I could see how isolated she was becoming. She had played her part in all of this, but now she was left holding the bag. Aiden no longer cared about her. He saw her as a liability, someone whose involvement could endanger his carefully laid plans. She was just another pawn in his game, and once she'd outlived her usefulness, he discarded her. One night, after days of silence, Melissa called me. Her voice was thin and fragile. "Grayson, please. I can't do this anymore. I need to talk to you. I want to fix things." I listened, but I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to believe her, but the truth was, too much had been broken. The damage was done. I met her in the same place we used to go when things were easier, the small cafe around the corner from our old apartment. She looked different, worn down. The woman who once stood tall beside me now seemed a shadow of herself. "Grayson," she whispered, "I never wanted any of this to happen. I made a mistake, a huge mistake." I could see the tears welling in her eyes, but I didn't feel anything anymore. Not for her. Not after everything she'd done. "You can't just fix this, Melissa," I said coldly, my voice colder than I intended. "Trust doesn't come back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And what you did, it's unforgivable." She reached out, her hand trembling, but I pulled back. "Please, Grayson. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance." I shook my head. "My decision final? You had your chance, and you threw it away." I watched her walk away, defeated, and for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. I couldn't go back to the woman who betrayed me. I couldn't rebuild a relationship that had been poisoned from the inside out. Melissa wasn't the only one feeling the heat. Rachel, who had been working with me from the start, was feeling the weight of her own guilt. She couldn't take the pressure of being caught between Aiden and me. One evening, she came to Jules and confessed everything, handing over copies of the forged documents that Aiden and Lawrence White had used to undermine me. She admitted her involvement in helping Aiden, but she wanted out. Jules, ever the loyalist, assured her that she was doing the right thing. "You've made the right choice, Rachel," she said. "Now we'll make sure this is over." The moment had come. I had everything I needed. I called for an emergency board meeting, one that I knew would bring everything to a head. The room was filled with directors who had long since stopped questioning Aiden's influence. But when I walked in, they could feel the shift. They knew something was coming. I stood in front of them, holding all the cards. I didn't waste time. I presented the evidence: Marcus's surveillance footage, Rachel's testimony, the forged documents, and I watched as their faces changed. Aiden tried to spin his usual story, tried to turn the tables by accusing Melissa of being the mastermind behind everything. But the room was silent as the truth unfolded before them. And then, just as I knew it would, Eleanor Price's story went live. The world was watching as her article exposed Aiden's shell corporation, the illegal transactions, and the full extent of his corruption. The board members looked at each other, their decision clear. They voted unanimously to remove Aiden from his position. Lawrence White's contracts were terminated on the spot. Aiden's empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But my work wasn't done. I had one more thing to do. I publicly announced my intention to file for divorce. It was a clean break. No more lies. No more manipulations. The weight of everything that had happened felt lighter as I made the announcement. Melissa, humiliated and ostracized, came to me one last time, pleading for forgiveness, trying to make me see reason. But I couldn't look at her anymore without seeing the betrayal, and I had no intention of allowing her to benefit from my success. I made sure she would receive no financial benefit from the business empire I'd built. Everything was locked up. Everything was mine. The end of the marriage wasn't just about me. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost. I had been a fool for too long, trusting the wrong people. But now, I was done. Aiden's downfall had been swift, and Melissa's had been inevitable. The storm had passed, and I had emerged from it stronger than ever. The fall of a man like Aiden Carr doesn't happen overnight. It's like a building collapsing, slowly at first. But once the structure begins to give way, there's no stopping it. The authorities moved in quickly after everything I had set in motion. Aiden was arrested for fraud and embezzlement, the evidence against him irrefutable. His assets were frozen, leaving him with nothing. His name, once associated with business deals and promises, was now synonymous with deceit and corruption. The press couldn't get enough of it. Every paper, every news channel, was covering his downfall in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Lawrence White, the lawyer who had orchestrated so many of Aiden's schemes, wasn't far behind. Once the investigation dug deeper, it came to light that Lawrence had been involved in multiple fraudulent activities, not just with Aiden, but with several other clients as well. The authorities had no choice but to disbar him, effectively ending his career. The man who once held power in the boardrooms and courtrooms had become just another cautionary tale. But as Aiden's world collapsed, mine was beginning to take shape again. With the chaos behind me, I shifted my focus to rebuilding Nexus Solutions. Rachel, who had once been caught in Aiden's manipulations, had proven her loyalty time and time again. Her decision to come forward with the forged documents was the turning point, and she had more than redeemed herself. It didn't take long for me to recognize her skills. She was sharp, capable, and, most importantly, honest. I brought her on board to help restructure the company, and before long, she had earned herself a promotion to a managerial position. It wasn't just her professional abilities that impressed me, though. As we worked together, something more started to form between us. There was a quiet strength in Rachel, a contrast to the deceit I'd experienced with Melissa. She didn't have an agenda. She didn't need to prove anything. She was simply someone who understood loyalty, integrity, and hard work. Over time, our professional relationship began to evolve into something more personal. We spent long hours in the office, brainstorming and strategizing for the company's future. And in the quiet moments, when the workday was over, we'd talk about life, about our pasts, about what we wanted moving forward. She wasn't Melissa. She didn't need to be, and I didn't need her to be. Meanwhile, Melissa's life had taken a sharp turn. With nothing left but the remnants of a marriage and a failed partnership, she had no choice but to start over. She began painting again, something she had pushed aside years ago to support me. It was a slow process, but she found solace in the canvas, the colors, and the shapes she created. She even held a small gallery exhibition of her work, a modest success. It wasn't the grand gallery she had once dreamed of, but it was something. Then, one day, I received a letter from her. A heartfelt one, filled with apologies and remorse. She admitted everything. The manipulation, the betrayal, the mistakes. She apologized for hurting me, for hurting everything we had built. And though the words were genuine, I couldn't find it within myself to forgive her completely. I acknowledged the letter, but I remained distant. I understand, I wrote back, but trust is not something that can be rebuilt once it's gone. I knew the letter was her attempt at redemption, but I couldn't allow myself to be pulled back into the chaos she had created. I had moved on, and there was no going back. And so, with Melissa trying to rebuild her own life, and Aiden's empire in ruins, I turned my attention to the one thing that had kept me going through all of this, the cybersecurity platform. The day we launched it was nothing short of triumphant. After all the blood, sweat, and tears, Nexus Solutions finally had something to show for it. The platform was a success, and the response from clients was overwhelming. Investors were lining up, eager to be part of the next big thing. I had regained what I'd lost and more. The company's reputation was restored, and I had built it from the ground up again. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to give back. I established a charitable foundation to support aspiring entrepreneurs, helping them avoid the mistakes I had made along the way. It was my way of ensuring that others had the chance to succeed, to build something meaningful, without the betrayals I had endured. As the foundation grew, so did my sense of purpose. And that purpose led me to a corporate gala one evening, an event that marked a new chapter in my life. It was there, among old colleagues and new investors, that I introduced Rachel to the world, not just as my colleague, but as my partner. It was a quiet declaration of everything I had fought for. A fresh start, a clean slate, a future built on trust and honesty. We stood together, side by side, at the gala. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Later that night, I found myself on a balcony, looking out over the city. The lights shimmered below me, a stark contrast to the dark times I'd left behind. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayals, the lies, the endless battles, and I realized something. I had survived it. I had fought my way through the worst of it and come out stronger. And now, with Rachel by my side, I was ready to embrace a future without the shadows of betrayal hanging over me. The storm was over. The rebuilding had begun. And this time, nothing was going to tear it down.